So a lot of technologies seem to mature rather slowly and then rapidly. Now, case in point, it seemed to take years for the promise of the cloud to become second nature to some companies. And although things like blockchain have hit a bit of a roadblock in terms of popularity, things like AI that are now part of the culture took decades to develop. So I want to talk to an expert that can give us some perspective on the roadmap of these technologies. And today I'm talking to Semirah Dolan, who's an engineer, blockchain developer, and inventor. Now, she began her career as a chemical engineer apprentice with the United States Navy before going on to become a professional engineer at companies like Johnson & Johnson, Alcoa, eBay, and Dell. She's spoken at conferences all around the world for Mozilla, Grace Hopper, and many more. How are you doing, Samira?
Good. Thank you for asking, Ray.
I am super excited to have you here. That's an amazing career. Thank you for your service. I'm so happy that you came to the show today. Now, your career has spanned lots of different engineering roles from manufacturing to software. You worked as a chemical engineer, as I mentioned, for the US Navy and a mechanical engineer. And then you became now a cloud engineer. So, can you talk a little bit about what drove the key points in your career path? How did you go from where you started at to where you are today?
That's an amazing question. And thank you for asking. And thank you for everyone for taking the time to join us today. As Ray shared, I'm Semirah Dolan. And too long don't read is that it wasn't key points, but more of key people. And then the
Hmm.
long part is that before going into engineering, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. So going into college as a mechanical engineer, I had no idea what it was. And no one in my family was in the tech space or the engineering space or the corporate space. So no one could tell me what it was. But one thing my mom and my family did teach me was that to use knowledge and education as a weapon. So I knew I needed to get a ton of experience in the space to become knowledgeable and to become a subject matter expert. So that is why there were so many roles, so many experiences, was to fuel being able to know, like, what am I getting myself into? And then the key role that guided to where I am today was when I was at Dell Technologies as a systems engineer. And in that role, I was afforded the opportunity to have the resources and the tools to learn about infrastructure, about cloud computing. And then that led me to, where I am today. All the technology that I've worked on in my current role at Salesforce is all within the realm of cloud.
So, do you feel that any of that sort of previous experience, the Navy, chemical engineering, how has that sort of affected where you are today in terms of the technology change? I imagine there's a big difference between what you were doing back then to now, but is there any threads that kind of bring it together?
Yes, I would say the one thread is that when there's different use cases where I'm working, I'm able to have previous experience that I can call to. But then also, a lot of those places use similar processes. So I'm always bringing a toolkit of how to go about implementing innovative technology or how to, enable a team on new technology to be able to build or to be able to, within the internal systems, figure out how to implement if it's blockchain, if it's AI or whatever the technology aspect that they're trying to do.
That's great. So let's talk about this role of the cloud, because I know you are an expert in the cloud itself. And now we have this kind of AI that is, I guess, sitting on top of the cloud and taking a lot of the sort of processing power, maybe not away from the cloud, but making it part of everyone's experience now with all the GPT tools, the generative AI tools. So, what's the intersection of these two different technologies fields like for you?
Yes. So what I'll say in regards to like being an expert, there are so many people in the space. There are folks in data who have been working on ML and AI for, 10 plus years. So I think everyone has their intersection of where they have their expertise. So for me, it would be more on the cloud computing side. And the intersection between cloud computing and AI is that AI workloads run off of cloud computing resources. So the cloud computing resources are like the fuel to the AI rocket ship. There's a ton of AI companies and they're using so much compute resources to be able to run their AI workloads. So to give an example, there's a Fortune 100 company that it's a public use case where they're building their own proprietary AI. And so in this, they're putting together an enterprise specific model of their own LLM, as well as using open source LLMs, so large language models that have over 7 billion parameters. And so in doing that, they're using so much compute power to be able to do so. And it's a key part of their AI functionality.
So if companies had to sort of, I don't know, understand that they're going to be spending more money because of the, as you mentioned, sort of the taxing amounts of compute power that are necessary to run an AI, do you feel that companies are ready, or what are they doing to adjust to this new world?
That's a good question. So our company's ready. So there are some companies that already have like cloud resources that they can then allocate towards AI workloads. So if you have your own on-premise, servers, and you can then start to say, okay, let's allocate some of these resources to trying out what AI would look like for us. And there are other folks that are utilizing some of the cloud resources that are now coming out available. So, for example, there's, Dell came out with a new platform to where you can build your own AI models without having your own on-premise resources. I believe IBM also came out one in HPE. So it's becoming more accessible if you don't have your own resources to be able to do it now. And then also wanted to say a big part, aside from just compute resources, is the skill gap, which is a big part of my platform. So when I look in around the rooms that I'm in, I realize that there's a huge skill gap in being able to achieve what companies want to achieve in the AI space. ChatGPT came, and everyone internally was like, "Who do we have that like knows what ChatGPT is, or that can build within the
For
space
sure.
and create like a ChatGPT for us, or something like that?" So they're looking around. I was talking to a VC firm, and like they're looking at their interns to help them figure out like, hey, you guys know what ChatGPT is?
Wow.
How can we use it internally?
Yeah, definitely. You really do feel that sense of, I don't know, an injection of energy in
Mm-hmm.
technology. We felt like there had been a lot of technologies that maybe, I don't know, didn't pan out. I know you did some work for Ethereum, as a blockchain consultant, and that technology doesn't seem to get as much press today. And we had
Mm-hmm.
Meta with the metaverse that was going to be the next great thing. That didn't
Yeah.
seem to generate like a new level of excitement. And then when everybody thought, well, it's over, I guess, we don't have anything else to think about, AI came out. And a lot of people don't understand is that, as you mentioned, this is a new technology. It's somehow ChatGPT kind of exploded it into the culture, but these things have been around. And I think that, whereas the AI has been in the background, now it's way out in the forefront. And it's kind of reinvigorated the technology field. So is there a role for some of those things like blockchain in an AI future?
So the blockchain world still exists today. It's from what I've seen, it's more like underground niche startups still exist now. There's a lot of government work in the blockchain space. And I know it exists. I know we were talking about this earlier. There may be, companies working on the intersection of blockchain and AI. It's just not in, my field of, what I've seen happening. But I can definitely see where there could be some intersection around data integrity, being able to ensure that the data that you're training your AI, like where does that data hail from? Or is it just made up? There's a lot of problems with folks using ChatGPT and the information not being correct. So, like, there was a lawyer who referenced a case that didn't exist anymore. So there could be an opportunity with blockchain and AI to then put the ties of is this data true? And then there may be some other options around, trusting your AI systems. Again, there's probably startups out there that are in the blockchain and AI space. But the big drawback, I will say, for both of these trends, both blockchain and both AI, is that it takes a lot of resources to run both of these systems. There's a lot of energy consumption, and in the space that we're in now, like for example, there was the AI for Good summit that recently happened, and we're seeing that running, LLMs and all these companies getting into the space is taking a ton of compute resources, which then stems to building, data centers that are specific to these technology trends, and that really can take a toll on our land resources and things like that. So it would be
Yeah,
cool if both of them were intersected, but it would also like impact us in different ways.
yeah, I feel like there's definitely, I don't know, an opportunity to some of this technology. You mentioned this AI summit.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is exactly the one you were talking about, but yeah, I feel like there's renewed interest in some of these technologies that can maybe be of use. And I really do think that blockchain can be something that is going to be really important in terms of like, I'm not sure really, I'm not an expert, but I'm thinking in the way that it provides a sense of security. I know a lot of companies are looking for ways to make sure that they're not only that their data is protected, but also that they can verify where information came from. So track that
Yeah.
information. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about, is there anything that the blockchain can technically do that would work super well for AI?
Well, that's what I was mentioning around data integrity. So just being able,
Mm-hmm.
like, able to have smart contracts that track where your data is being trained and
Mm-hmm.
where is it deriving from. So there's a lot of companies who are building their own AI models, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
you want to know, like, did this data come from proprietary information that we fed the AI? And blockchain, you could create smart contracts that tracks that, or did this data come from an open source platform of data sets that we have no idea where the origin was? So that's one aspect where I could see it coming together. And then potentially even with blockchain, there's aspect of tokenizing things,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's the same thing with AI. So there could be an intersection there as well in regards to tracking your data.
Yeah, and that's really important. I think that's kind of like one of the huge areas, besides trying to bring down like hallucinations. I think that, uh, something like DRM for this new age, I think it's something that blockchain might have a role to play in that. And, as much as people sometimes complain about digital rights management, it's really a catalyst for making things, work well and for companies to feel like they can be safe using some of these technologies. So, what are some of these sort of challenges that companies that have perhaps a solid cloud infrastructure are faced now with the adoption of artificial intelligence? I know that you mentioned that a lot of them are reassessing, their cloud strategy. But what other things have you seen, and how are they being addressed by these companies?
Yeah, so I will start off again to say number one would be skill gap. That's the first thing when
Mm,
teams come together. They're trying to put together a strategy and figure out, okay, what next steps do we take? The big thing is, okay, who is going to do this for us? And then the next would be what we touched on previously, would be around data quality. So AI models again require high quality. If we're going to use a type of GPT tool, we want to make sure that we can
hmm
trust that data. And then in regards to like a solution there for companies, what I've seen folks do is put together some level of data governance to ensure the data
mm,
quality as they're integrating data from like various sources. A lot of folks are using cloud-based data lakes and then controlling the data pipeline that they're accessing, that their teams are using. And then the second would be around the resources that we talked about. So like scaling and performance. AI workloads can really strain cloud resources. A lot of companies during COVID were pushed to be multi-cloud.
mm,
So
hmm
we had to reach consumers on the edge. We had to provide our applications to folks remotely, and so then companies had to then onboard on an AWS or a GCP or an Azure, and then now on top of that, coming out of that experience, we're now in AI. Now we need to figure out, do we have more resources to then try to stay ahead of this technology? And the third complexity I would say would be around model training. So when it
mm,
comes to training AI models, that in itself is resource intensive. It's time consuming. So for example, Bloomberg just came out with Bloomberg GPT. They
mm,
trained their own proprietary GPT model, and it costed them almost $1 million in cloud resources to be able to do so. But however, is it a really accurate and like really great tool for the finance industry? Yes, it is. So it puts them at a competitive edge there. And so in regards to like cost management, is the cost of being ahead of this technology and being in that space effective for what your business is trying to do. So monitoring that, putting together management tools to determine, and then kind of went through a ton. But last thing would be like ethics and regulatory considerations.
Mm-hmm.
A big challenge that a lot of folks have is that they'll put together these AI tools, they'll release them out into the public, and then something happens regarding bias or privacy concerns. And so, in putting out this technology, I really advise folks to develop and adhere to some type of ethical AI guidelines. Google has an amazing fairness guideline that you could track towards. Microsoft also is coming out with one as well, and these are guidelines you can use to just have fairness in the data that you're using and the ethical challenges that may come up when you are putting out these AI tools into the public. And then I did say that was the last one, but this one that you touched on earlier is around security. So as AI is being introduced into your data streams, you're integrating it into your own processes, or you're putting your own proprietary code in the platform. You want to make sure that your team's aware of security risk, attacks, model vulnerabilities,
Mm-hmm.
and implement different like security measures to mitigate things like that.
Hmm. That's really interesting. And I know that you mentioned a couple of things that just piqued my
Yeah.
interest, and I looked them up really quick. So you mentioned this responsible AI practices from Google. So I think when you're looking at some of these ethical considerations, taking a look at what's already been created is a really good way to educate yourself and to
Mhm.
learn how people are thinking about AI. I know that another thing that I really have enjoyed was taking a look at, for example, how Adobe stock is now being added into generative AI is being added into Adobe stock.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that, besides the fact that it's happening at all, I didn't know that was going to happen that fast, is that they're really thinking about the questions that need to be answered when you are incorporated AI. So if you look at their documentation, you can see that they have thought about these ethical considerations, and they're asking for things like if you use the image of a person that is an AI person, you still need to provide with a release form, which is sort of weird because you think a release form is like for a human being. How can an AI sign a release?
Yeah.
But it makes you think twice about these ethical considerations and the things that you need to think about. So that's an excellent example of taking a look at how companies are approaching some of these ethical minds that everybody is hitting. And I
Yeah.
think that what you mentioned about training and sort of answering these questions. You also mentioned this interesting thing that I hadn't heard about from Bloomberg, which they developed, I
Yeah.
guess, a 50 billion parameter large language model,
Hmm.
and everybody's doing something with AI. Interesting
Right.
that they did this, and I think that we're in this super exciting place where companies are experimenting, and they can quickly become leaders in their space by looking at what they have and being able to think about how can we take our strengths in case of Bloomberg financial information and make AI sort of a way to enhance what we can do. So
Exactly.
that's
Yes.
pretty
And
interesting. So
yes, that was an amazing use case I saw. And then I love the Adobe example that you gave. For folks that
mhm.
follow me, I will actually be doing the LinkedIn Live on the September 24th with someone from Adobe who will be going through some of their AI tools. So we'll be doing a cool demo of that. And then in regards to like, you said making sure, what was the thing you said they had to sign about the rights if you were accessing someone's photo?
Yeah, so Adobe, the interesting thing to me, and I don't know, maybe I'm just sort of a security nerd, but was or ethical kind of person. Like for me, the interesting thing was that they're allowing AI generated art, but if you're using a person, they ask you to sign a release form, which I have been a photographer before, and I know that whenever we took photos that we wanted to use, everybody had to sign a release form, but they've actually started to think about what those releases will look like and what that does. See, exactly. So Adobe stresses just because a computer created a piece of art, that doesn't mean that you're clear to use it. It will
Mhm.
still require model releases if AI
Yeah.
generated art portrays or is intended to portray and identify a person. So if one of the things that people do with these all is use them to maybe modify how a person looks, then
Mm-hmm.
if you're basing it on an individual, that individual has to sign a release, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And in a way, Adobe, and this would be a great perhaps question. And if you're watching the show, I'll put all those links in the show notes so you can get to your upcoming live. But Adobe's thinking about those things.
Mm-hmm.
You might not even know which questions to ask by looking at what somebody else is, the ideas that people are coming up with and solving these issues. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to give you freedom to kind of have a starting point to go to a company like this that is
Yes.
already incorporating those issues. So, um,
Yes.
with
It
that,
reminds
yes,
no,
go ahead. Sorry.
the release form reminds me of the strikes happening in Hollywood right now,
That's right.
where
That's
they're
right.
yes, yes, they're trying to use AI to replicate actors and only pay them once so that they can use them, 100 times in a movie, but they only get paid for showing up one time. And it's causing a huge stare. There's a ton of press releases out right now along the line of a lot of actors, having to downsize on their lifestyle right now because the strike is trying to show folks in Hollywood that you can't take advantage of folks and not pay them for their likeness, the impact that they have on a movie or a piece of content. So I think Adobe's is definitely speaking to and trying to put policies around, releases of folks that you're basing your art off of, and how do we continuously support the folks that we have in our content. Yes,
Yeah. So
exactly
yeah,
right here that you're
yeah,
agreeing.
all these things are happening, and as you mentioned, very quickly, and everybody has to think about how do they kind of how do they work with AI? You could see a lot of legal issues besides ethical issues already coming
Yes,
to
yes.
the forefront and being worked out by the different literally, I was going to say actors, but literally actors in this case. Like they're trying to figure out how do we do this, and a lot of them who are unionized are fighting for their rights, which is a great thing. It's how things are done. I mean,
Yeah.
so I wanted to talk a little bit about your LinkedIn course on cloud foundations. What are some of the perhaps key takeaways that you were discussing in that course?
Yeah, so as we talked about in some of the previous questions, a big part with cloud is that there is a huge skill gap. And so
Mm,
I want learners to walk away with an understanding of what cloud computing is, its benefits, and how it can transform the landscape of technology today. So my current courses start the learner on the type of applications that you could deploy to the cloud. For
mhm.
many folks that are looking to transition into the cloud space, they usually have some foundational understanding of what an application is, and so we start the journey here to get them to understand how that bridges into cloud
patterns to implement.
computing. Yep, that's
Go ahead.
me. So,
It's great.
and then I have two more courses coming out shortly. Did you have a question?
No, no, no. I played the video and it had a little piece of your audio, so I'm sorry about that. It's always
No, no,
strange to
no.
like listen to yourself, right?
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yes, it's
um,
great.
in addition to these two courses, there are two more coming out soon all around Java. So there will be one on the Java SDK for AWS. This one was super cool because AWS just came out with an AI code generator called Code Whisperer, and
Hmm.
there you will actually be able to get a demo of it in the upcoming courses. And I did the demo on IntelliJ for folks that were gearing up to see that course come live. That one was super exciting. And the second one was on Java profiling. Yep, that's Amazon Code Whisperer. It helps generate code. In the demo, you'll see that you get multiple options for like a snippet of code that you can add in. And then as you're
Hmm.
coding, Code Whisperer actually provides like suggestions for what the next step could be. So it's a really cool tool that I think folks should try out. And then if you're not sure where to start, you can go ahead and follow me, and I'll let you know when that course goes live in October to be able to see what it looks like pending. And yeah, so for folks that are interested in like, hearing more about those upcoming courses, I supplement a lot of the content on Cloud Foundations with my newsletter, with videos like this, upcoming LinkedIn Lives. And it's all around enabling folks around me in the cloud computing space. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, that's a huge gap that I see when I look in the rooms that I'm in. There are not a lot of folks that are in my intersection of technology, and I want to get more folks into that space. I've always done that since college when I was the president of my National Society of Black Engineers chapter, and then going out into the industry. Always was somehow giving out information about technology and things. I think it's the big sister in me to always be like, hey, here's how to do something. Here's how I did it. Like, we're all in here to figure out how to get this to work, and I want to share those resources with folks.
Yeah, we were talking in the what I call the pre-show about how important it is to have like mentors that help each other. You get so much out of
Mhm.
just talking to somebody who is, sort of into the same things that you're into, and especially for minorities like us, I feel like having somebody that looks like you is really important to see somebody in a position that you're perhaps looking towards. So I did want to point people to your sort of LinkedIn profile. And I think, as you mentioned, I think these are the links over here to the different talks that you're having, right? So you have already 3 scheduled in there, as well as
Yes,
you have this thing called the Cloud News Network. So you already have 600
yes,
subscribers almost. So what is this
yes.
about, this Cloud News Network?
Yes, it's your monthly dose of cloud trends, cloud resources. So if you want to find a place where you can learn about what's going on, speak the vernacular, because a lot of times for folks who are trying to get into the space, you really don't know where to start or how to speak the
Hmm.
language. And so I share some resources as well as talk about new technologies. So there was like the AI bench from Google, I believe, and then show some sample use cases for
Hmm.
folks on their learning journey. So everything from folks that are already in their career. The big thing that I built my platform on as someone in technology is being someone that's on top of innovative trends. And so when I first got
Hmm.
into cloud computing, I'm in a space where everyone understands IT. Everyone
Hmm.
has, deep expertise in infrastructure and going to the cloud. But a lot of those folks weren't putting in the time and resources to now understand, multi-cloud architecture or understand, blockchain or understand how we can use cloud and AI. And so I talk about a lot of that in my newsletter and my upcoming courses for folks that want to stay on top of what's happening in the space.
So you published the last one you published was just 3 days ago, and it looks like it's about maybe once a month or so that you release these.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Already subscribed, as you can see. I just clicked on the button,
Mhm.
so I'll make sure that I share that with the rest of our network. Now, one thing that I was really excited to find about you is that you actually developed a patent at eBay. Talk a little bit about that process, because I think that not everybody meets like a patent holder. So talk a little
Mhm.
bit about the process of what you did at eBay, how you came up with that idea, and what impact do you think it has on making live events more accessible?
Yes. So again, I think when we started this live, your question was like, what are some points in my career where there was changes, but it was always people. And I had a mentor and a manager at the time that really believed in me, let me be creative in my role. And throughout my job, I would see different gaps of opportunity. And so this patent was a solution that I designed for folks with disabilities that needed physical accommodation to be able to have virtual access to a venue before attending. And so physical accommodation could be like mobile, visual, or auditory like accommodations that they would need. And so this solution gave users a virtual experience of like all the ingress and egress options for a venue. How far would it take them to get to the restroom? And anything that they would need to consider before appearing to where they want to go. And then the process for the patent, again, my manager was super supportive. So she provided me the resources to be able to go through this process, to connect with lawyers, to make sure that the wording was correct, make sure that my idea was unique, and have all that paperwork in line to get it to go through. and started it in 2018, but it actually didn't, the process didn't complete until 2022. So I'm no longer with that company, and the idea was sold to StubHub. So I'm not sure what StubHub is doing with the idea, but I hope that it sparks like future innovation for folks. But it definitely was an amazing experience, to be able to go through that process, because like you said,
Mhm.
that's very rare. If I were to do that without support, it would, it would cost a lot. I would have no idea where to start, so it would take me more time. So the guidance from my manager and mentor were pivotal to that experience.
Yeah, and what I like about you is that you really are focused on not just, taking advantage of the help that you receive from people, but you're also a diversity ambassador within the tech industry, and that's something that you're super passionate about. So, what do you think that AI and the cloud are doing to that ability of people to maybe get together? Like, how is AI and perhaps the cloud changing those kind of things in terms of diversity and also in terms of being able to communicate maybe a little bit better?
Yeah, so I guess to start on context, so two of my identities are considered minorities in tech. So that being Black
Hmm.
in tech and a woman in tech. And so as a diversity ambassador, I've observed that, there are a few pillars of ways that you can positively engage with my community. You can either simply exist as a good example, you could be a role model, you can contribute to the community, or you can share your expertise. And so for me, I take on the role of sharing my expertise. And that's how I like to give back. And so, in regards to cloud and AI, in the past, minority communities have really missed out on benefiting from these huge trends. So, when processors, a ton of businesses gained a lot of traction there, the dot-com bubble and things like that, startup funds, it's the minority community really isn't representative in those spaces. So my platform is all around extending the ladder back, sharing my expertise with those around me. Because again, I noticed that a huge gap and the disparity in the rooms that I'm in is that representation. And the ways that I do that for others is I love, hosting workshops, talks about technology and my expertise. I a few months ago was at a university talking to a few folks, and the biggest thing that I feel like they took away was some of that knowledge, that like the small talk that no one will tell you. Like, okay, when you go to negotiate in a space, like what do you do? How do you present yourself? When you're trying to learn about cloud computing, what are the actual resources that you should use to learn? What certifications would actually get you to where you need to go and things like that. And so that's part of my platform is creating that enablement for cloud and AI. I'm all about just encouraging folks to get into the space, demystifying what it takes to get into this industry, and sharing those resources with others, motivating others. I love to see people winning. So that's what I do and take on as my role as a diversity ambassador.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so important to kind of develop a perspective of, being a mentor perhaps, or just helping others in the same way that people helped you. You mentioned your patent work, and, I know that I have so many people that I, would thank all the way back to, my teacher in high school who, showed me that computer science was a career that perhaps I could do. I remember that I arrived because we were moving from country to country. I arrived late, and he couldn't start the class again for me. But he gave me basically he made a bunch of problems and told me, "Here's the book. I'm here as a resource, but I think you can if you create some interesting projects, then I'll be here to help you." But that's really the ability of thinking, oh, this isn't just like a class that I have to read the assignments and just do the problems, that this can be like a creative thing. That's really what turned me on to technology. And I'll never forget him doing that for me.
Yeah.
And then multiple, we could probably spend a whole hour talking about the people that made an impact. So for everybody, try to not just be the helpy, but give back by making an impact. And people that are like you will get so much out of it. So super
I
excited to
love that.
talk to you. And yeah, I definitely am very thankful for you and again for your service and for you being on the show today. I want to, oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I just took you
One thing,
off for
one
some
thing.
reason.
No
Yes.
worries. Yes, I don't want to mislead anyone. So the
Mhm.
for the U.S. Navy, that was like a contract and like a contract job experience. I
Mhm.
thank you everyone else for their service, but I did not like
Uh,
serve in any major capacity.
yeah, but you did have an impact into the Navy, which is really, really still a huge thing. So thank you for that very much. But I'm glad you clarified. So I did want to mention like all the places where you can find more about the show. So we do have like a LinkedIn page where you can get more information about the show, and I also have a newsletter. And what's nice is that I all the links that we talked about, and in every show, we kind of come up with new and interesting links that I'll put together into and paste them in the newsletter, and we'll get to kind of the highlights of the show as well as show notes. So that's a really really good resource. That's probably my favorite way to sort of review what happened during a show. There's like an episode guide where you can find the future and previous guests, a YouTube playlist, as well as an audio podcast. So next time we have Ravit Jain, and we were talking about community and sort of like the importance of having a community that supports you. So I'm super interested to talk to Ravit next week about the work that he's doing. Actually, he will be like an expert, what do you call it? Community leader in the industry and how he uses AI to build communities in the field. And that should be pretty exciting. So hopefully you can catch the show next week. Thank you so much, Samira, for
Thank
being
you.
in the show. I was so excited to have you, and hopefully I'll have you back. I definitely am going to dig into those LinkedIn live sessions. So hopefully I can make all of them. And I'm really curious because you found some pretty cool people to talk to.
Yes, thank you so much, Ray, and I can't wait. And one thing I do want to leave with folks is when they're considering getting into building AI for their companies, three major questions when you're putting out to folks is what will we be accountable for? What will we be transparent about? And what is fair in the world of Gen AI? I'll leave it with
That
that.
is fantastic. That's super. Great advice. And I think those are probably the three things that people are trying to figure out the most right now. So thank you
The
so
hard
much,
question.
Samira. I'll talk to you
Hmm.
later. Bye bye.
Thank you, Ray.